Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Addicted Mind podcast. I hope you're having a wonderful day today. My name's Dwayne Osterland. I'm your host, and we are on to another episode. Today, my guest is the incredible Marci Hopkins, a renowned TV personality and the brilliant mastermind behind the captivating talk show Wake Up with Marci, a talk show with a heart that has won the prestigious Telly Award 3 times. Marci is not only a talk show host, but also an accomplished author of the inspiring book, Chaos to Clarity, Seeing the Signs and Breaking the Cycles. She is a public speaker and recovery expert. Her expertise in recovery has made her a sought-after figure in the media with appearances on Fox, CBS, NBC, and ABC, where she has left a lasting impact on viewers nationwide. I am so excited to have her on the Addicted Mind podcast. So she's going to share some of her story and her struggle and how she got into recovery and really is now living the life that she loves and wants. And she's going to talk about how she was able to do that and share a little bit about her book, Chaos to Clarity, with us today and how she put that all together to be able to bring that to more people, to bring that hope and that happiness that she has been able to find in her own life. So it's a great story and she is inspiring. And so I really hope you get a lot out of this episode. It was really great to talk with Marci. I really enjoyed it. So I hope you enjoy it as well. And if you're getting a lot out of the Addicted Mind podcast, please rate and review us in iTunes. That really does help the podcast get found. I really appreciate it. I do read them and they do mean a lot to me. And follow us on Instagram at Addicted Mind Podcast. All right, everybody, stay tuned for this episode. All right, everyone, welcome to the Addicted Mind podcast. My guest today is Marci Hopkins, and we're going to talk about chaos in some ways, and we're going to get to that. But let's just jump in. Marci, start to tell us about you and what you do and all the things that are going on. We'll get to know you first, and we're going to jump into the chaos.
Awesome. Well, my name is Marci Hopkins. Thank you so much for having me on. I am the host of a television talk show called Wake Up with Marci. And I was inspired to do this show to help others like you're doing with your podcast. And when I launched the show, it was about sharing stories of hardship, but the triumph on the other side to share hope with others. I'm also the author of Chaos to Clarity, Seeing the Signs and Breaking the Cycles. And that is another miracle that has happened since my sobriety. I'm also a mother of 2 and I live in New Jersey. I do public speaking and a number of other things. So
That's
life
awesome.
is so good now. So it's great to be here.
Yeah. And I love, one of the reasons I do the podcast, like you say, is sharing stories of thriving and hope and that there is ways out of all of this and there is direction. And, when we share our stories, we give hope to others. So let's just kind of jump in and tell us a little bit about your story and how you kind of got there and when you kind of started to realize it and started to embrace a sober lifestyle and then and go from there.
Well, I will tell you, October was my 8-year sober anniversary.
Wow.
So very grateful to have 8 years. But I did have a lifelong relationship until that time with alcohol. I started drinking in my teen years. I used alcohol as a way of coping with my trauma. I had a lot of abandonment issues, victim issues, sexual abuse issues, physical abuse, mental abuse. So there was a lot of abuse that occurred in my childhood. Also, both my parents were alcoholics. My grandfather, there a lot of addiction in my family. And so seeing alcohol being used every day was very normal for me. So once I got out of high school, I probably drank every single day up until the time I stopped. Well, there was a few months in between,
Right.
maybe I'd stopped.
Few efforts for a little bit.
Right. But ultimately, I used alcohol to cope, as I said. But once I got in my 40s, I was married and my life looked really great. I mean, I managed to really be successful in my career in television. I used to work behind the scenes and
Right.
found my husband and got married. And, life looked fantastic on the outside, but I was still crumbling on the inside. And I decided at 40 to go after a lifelong dream and get in front of the camera. And that really catapulted me into excessive drinking
Wow.
because I was, my self-esteem and self-loathing and self-hate was it was exasperated by being in front of the camera. Like, so you're on this roller
I
coaster
would
of
imagine.
auditions, and I'm trying to be a mother and be there for my kids, and my husband's always working, and I just had no confidence to be in front of the camera, but yet I'm going after this. And so I started using alcohol as liquid courage. It started creating a lot of problems in my marriage, a lot of problems for myself, my relationships, and even my work.
Yeah.
So ultimately, my darkest days, I ended up going out for a gig. I had a DUI that day. And
Wow.
the next day, God for me stepped in and I was able to surrender and really, I had admitted, I thought it was, had a drinking problem and went for help before, but this time was different. I was just like,
That was
I
it.
need help. And I went to my husband. I admitted that I had a drinking problem and I needed help, and he embraced me. And it was like the whole weight of the world came off my shoulders. It was the first time I really felt love. Like, even though I was married,
Wow.
I never felt like anyone loved me or I even loved them. I didn't know. I didn't know how to
To
love or
do
what that
that.
really looked like. So, I started my journey that day. That was October 4th of 2017. And I just did what I had to do. And the miracles just keep on happening.
Can we go back a little bit?
Yeah.
Because I think so many people relate to something that you said, this part of like, before you got sober and you had that moment, there's
Mm-hmm.
that internal wrestling of
Oh, yeah.
all that trauma, the self-loathing, the like, yet on the outside, everything, you're holding it all together. And I wonder if you could talk to that, because I think so many people will relate to
Yeah.
that. Like, that's something we all can do
Yeah.
when we're in our trauma and
Yeah.
stuff.
It's sad because we try to push things down so much and we
Yeah.
build these walls. And this is our survival mode through life, right? And through this, we're just, I found it was very difficult for me to connect with people. So there was always really an internal dialogue of, I'm not good enough. They're not good enough. I'm not lovable. And the drinking all the while, like that was the only thing, the only time I felt good, I
Yeah.
suppose, is when I was drinking. And it did get to a point, like you're saying, like you don't just wake up one day and go, oh, I guess I'm just drinking too much. This was a lifelong thing for me, like watching what other people were doing. Am I drinking too much? Am I like my mom? Even though when things got difficult, my drinking would elevate and people would say things to me, I would get through that. And then somehow I would, I would tame my drinking. But every night for about a year, I would lay in bed and I would be like, I'm drinking too much. Like every night, I can't wait till I get that glass of wine and I'm, cooking dinner and like reviving. I felt like I was reviving myself just to get through the next part of my day, which was to take care of my kids and then take care of my husband. And so I was like looking for all these alternatives, like, could I get, acupuncture, or I was already working out a lot, but maybe different kinds of yoga or
Right.
kundalini or different
And it's
types
all
of,
internal. Like, it's
it
like,
is.
you're not sharing this journey with anybody
No,
else until
it's
you
like
had to, right? Until you
this
had to.
hell every night, every
Yeah.
day. And then, saying, I'm not going to do it again. And then you do the exact same thing the next day. And I do want to say, before I truly surrendered, about a year prior to that, I was drinking and making some bad decisions. And, that whole victim mentality, like everyone's wronging me. My husband's not with me. I have to take care of my kids. I have to do everything. And, my mother's not there. I have nobody to help me.
Yeah.
So, it's drinking that wine and in the evenings that was helping me get through it. But then it was, things were starting to happen, and it was like, maybe I do have a problem, and maybe I do need help. So then I made the decision to go to the 12-step program, and I was doing what I needed to do, but I still hadn't fully admitted to myself that I had a drinking problem. I didn't like the way I was drinking, but I wasn't fully admitting that I had a real problem. And, even when you had to say in the rooms, I'm an alcoholic, I'd say it, but I don't know that I fully believed it. And then I started comparing myself to other people in the room, like, well, that's not my story. That's not my story. I'm not drinking in the morning. I don't have to go to lunch every day and drink. And I'm in the PTO. I'm doing this with my kids. I'm at every game. I'm at every function. I'm making dinner every night, right? So I was comparing myself to everyone else. And I went the 3 months. I went on a vacation without drinking, and I convinced myself I didn't have a problem and that I could do this. And I went back to drinking, and I started drinking really slowly. And, then it just started creeping back up and and it's just that old roller coaster of that drinking craziness and like that chaos you're talking about. Like, I only knew chaos for my entire life. So if I didn't have chaos, I was creating chaos.
Yeah.
That's good.
And that's what right? Like you didn't know anything else. I mean, you grow up with all of those, the stuff, the abandonment, the trauma, the alcoholic home. I mean, that's just normal. That's life. Yeah. You don't even know that it's in some ways it's like, you don't even know it's chaotic or crazy or, until you do the work and you have that moment where you have to like you said, you had a DUI, you had to get help. Like, it's kind of like you get knocked down or something and you got to do something. And
I felt for me to really stop, I had to have a major consequence. And but I tell you, it was horrible. I mean, the shame, the guilt of getting behind the wheel of a car in a blackout, and as a mother, and that I could have harmed anyone else. Like, I still live with that, but I'm so thankful. And I just prayed so often, like, just thanking God that I didn't harm anyone.
Yeah.
It saddens me that it had to get that bad, but that's what worked for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But you took it and you've done something with it. So let's start to talk about that part. Like, that's the pain and getting to that point and saying, okay, I have to reach out for help. I need help. I have to surrender to this. I don't have a choice anymore, but something comes after that. Right. So let's go there.
I like that place better.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, it was hard. It was hard going into the 12-step program with my head down in shame.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I liked, because I live in, a community. So it's like, well, what if you see someone, and it's like, well, they're there for the same reasons. So I appreciated that. Everyone there is really there to lift you up. You got to find the right people that you want to be around. But they're all going through it too. And we all have our own program. But I will say that it is within those 12 steps that I did the most healing that I'd ever done in my life. I don't care how much therapy, and I'm a big proponent of therapy also, but all of these things are not going to work if you don't have a clear mind. And that's the clear mind and clearing my body and healing those things allowed me to really move into the surrender, the spirituality, the diving deep into the work as far as who hurt me finding my place, moving from that victim mentality, doing the work of giving to others, the gratitude. There's so many beautiful things that you do learn through recovery. And my life, it changed my life. I live a life now that I could never even imagine that I would have.
Right. Yeah. And, like your, chaos to clarity, right? That's the journey. So tell me a little bit about, that steps, because you're right. When people are right there in, in that moment, it feels so incredibly hopeless and desperate. And this is all it is right now in this moment. But like you said, you can get to clarity.
Yeah.
You can get there. You can get out of the chaos that you may not even have realized you were in.
Yeah.
To this other space. And I want to hear about that part.
Yeah. Right? Because I had to get through all of the consequences of my drinking and my DUI and the mess I made of my marriage and of my life. But if you're teetering and you're wondering, right, do I have a problem? I'd first say that if you're thinking about the amount you're drinking, if you are wondering if you have a problem, if people are saying things to you in your life, if you notice your relationships are being affected, if your job's being affected, you can't get off the couch. The first thing you think of is having a drink if you have anything going on in your life. Then it's a time to make a hard decision and realizing how hard it is. But it's the best gift that you can give to yourself is making that decision to put down the drink. Now there's multiple ways of getting the healing, right? And whether you need to go through detox. I'd say if you're a really heavy drinker, you don't want to just stop cold turkey, right? Because you could die.
That's a very good point. That's very, that's very dangerous. You definitely need medical help. And anybody out there thinking of stop drinking and they're drinking a lot, go get medical help.
Yeah. So medical help, go to a therapist, go to somebody close to you. Tell somebody around you that you need help. What are the options? What are the opportunities? And thankfully nowadays there are so many different options and modalities. And even like if you feel uncomfortable going in the room of the 12 steps program, at least through COVID, one of the great things is there's so many things online. There's the 12-step meetings around the world online. You can go to a meeting anytime now. You don't have to worry when just a meeting is planned in your community, right? There's telehealth, telehealth that you can get therapy and a very affordable therapy nowadays.
Yeah. What about like someone's out there and it's like, sitting through that, like you said, you had to go in there and your head's down in shame and like, how do you sit with those first moments of like, I think anybody who's in this, when they're reaching out for the help the first time, that the shame is so overwhelming.
Yes.
And sometimes, like you said, sometimes we have to kind of be forced through it. Mm-hmm. But what would you say to people like, oh, that's my roadblock there? I have too much shame about this. How do they get through that?
Well, I'd first say I walked into the room, right? And if you look around, you're going to see people that look just like you.
Yeah.
And everyone in there is at a different stage, but you are going in there for help. And believe it or not, you're helping the people in there. I don't care if they have 30 days, 10 years, 30 years. When you walk in there and you're at that place, you are reminding others of where they were. And it's so important to have that reminder. And pretty much everyone in that room wants to embrace you. You are not alone in what you're going through, because remember, everyone in that room went through something similar to you. So no story you tell is going to be a surprise to anyone. Like it doesn't, it really doesn't matter what you have to say, what you have to share, what your story is. Somebody in that room is going to have a very similar story. And I will say, I think it's very important when you go in there to be open to people coming up to you, take those numbers, listen to what people have to say. And as hard as it is, raise your hand and share. Because when you start sharing, when you start getting that out of yourself, out of your head, all that shame, you'll start connecting with people and realizing that you're not alone and you don't have to sit in all that alone, because there are so many people there that want to embrace you and help you.
Yeah. And like you said something earlier that kind of struck me when, you had that DUI and you reached it. It's the first time you felt love.
Yeah, it really, truly was.
And I think, when you're talking about these things, it's kind of like, if you haven't experienced that before, it seems so distant or not even understandable. But like what you're saying is like, that's really like love, like care.
Yes. So I'd like to, go back a little bit when, for me, with the abandonment from my mother not being around, my father not being around, when you have the abandonment and you have sexual abuse, you start viewing, first of all, that you must not be lovable because you feel like your mom doesn't want you, your dad doesn't want you. Then the sexual abuse happens. And then you feel like your idea of love changes. Like, so the only way that I can be loved is by what I look like on the outside and what I can give to others sexually. Right. So I thought the only way that I could get a guy to like me was to be, I guess, promiscuous in a way. But then when I started using that promiscuity, I found that as power, because I got to say when you got to touch me, right? And I wanted it. You don't tell me when you want it. So there was that, right? And it was really interesting because I've been listening to the Matthew Perry audiobook, and he talks about abandonment also, right? And not feeling loved because his parents would ship him off to his grandparents, and that's why he started using alcohol to fill that void. So I had a very skewed idea of what love was. I envisioned what I thought it was. I needed so much attention, and I never seemed to get it in a way that I needed it. But at the same token, even if somebody was giving me love, I didn't know how to receive it. I didn't know how to give it, receive it. So it was like in that moment, here I'm thinking this man has wronged me all these years. And, like I was really at a place I didn't want to be with him, but it was so magical. Here I am in my most vulnerable place, crumbling. And he embraces me no matter what has happened and says, I'm here for you and I love you. Like, wow. It was so beautiful.
That's amazing. And so you, like, in a way, experience this whole new paradigm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that was the switch. So then we got to, while I'm growing, he's growing, our relationship is changing, our communication is changing, our respect for one another is changing. We're not at each other's throats. We're learning to communicate and compromise and be the best versions of ourselves for each other. Because I'll tell you, he had to change a lot too. I mean, there's a two-side road, to everything, right? Two-side street. But we were able to do it through this healing. But it was because I was able to do that deep soul searching and bring out that beautiful little girl that was robbed, and bring that back to life, and then have that feeling of I'm deserving. I can walk through the fear and make things happen in my life that I want. I can have the relationship and be loved, and I can be an incredible mom. I don't have to be reactive to everything. I don't have to be wronged. Everybody's wronging me. I don't have to be the victim anymore. And incredible.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is what you get if you share your story with trustworthy people. Mm-hmm. And, this is the other side of it, right? Yeah. It's work, but it's so different. It's so much more, it's rewarding. And
it's so rewarding. But the thing is like to really think about what's happening. Like, you have been programmed and traumatized, and your body becomes addicted, and you have these dopamine hits by whatever you're addicted to, right? And it makes you feel good. And maybe whatever's happened, you don't feel good. So when you put that away, the one thing that you think is making you feel so good that then isn't feeling so good, you start to clear your mind. Your mind starts to heal. You heal at a cellular level. Your body's healing. Now you have the capability of rewiring your thoughts, rewiring your brain, changing your mindset, learning the tools that allow you to cope when life happens. Because life can be crappy,
Yep.
But how do we get through it without going straight to the thing that's only going to hurt us more? And there are so many ways to learn to shift our mindsets and to learn to live in that gratitude, and start with the practice when you wake up in the morning and realize you can start your day over. And there's just so many things that you can learn and you can change within your brain, your body, your heart. It's incredible.
And this is some of the wisdom in your book. So let's talk about what inspired you. I mean, I'm sure the story inspired you and was part of that, but to put pen to paper and start to create chaos to clarity. And how did that start to take place?
So the second part of that is seeing the signs and breaking the cycle. So seeing the signs is about the signs from the other side. So when I started opening myself up, when I became more spiritually connected, I started even using the law of attraction. There were things that I was able to identify that were guiding me in my life. There were so many signs. I tell all these God stories in my book because we all have the capability of having these God stories, and they are all around us. It's just being able to see them, recognize them, invite them into our experience. So I started having all these things start popping up, and people asking me, when are you going to write a book? And I'm like, write a book? I'm never going to write a book. That is like the most overwhelming task I can ever even think of, right? And who am I to write a book, But I just started continuing getting these guides. Things would come up, like all of a sudden, how to write a book. There were programs that would come up on social media, how to write a book. Then there were people that were coming into my life that could help me write a book. So I started just, I guess, surrendering to those signs.
Yep.
And when there was one last sign. I was sitting in my family room, something that popped up on TV. And I'm like, all right, I got to write this book. So I go out on my patio and I look up and I said, God, all right, I'm going to write this book. And I'm not kidding you. A rainbow appeared. 2 doves flew up and sat on the roof of my house, and a dragonfly flew by me. And dragonflies are another huge part of my story, God's story. But just like, what? And so I just knew that it was not an easy road, but I knew God had a purpose for me to do this to help other people. So I share my story. I share how I got through the 12-step program, what helped me, the steps and the tools that I was able to use to change my mindset, to change how I viewed and reacted to life, and all of the signs from the other side, how I broke generational cycles. I mean, so much that happens to us. I mean, this is just like pushed onto us, I think about my mother. I had to forgive, right? Because that's a huge part, right? Forgiving. And that's not saying, okay, it's okay that my stepdad abused me. It's okay that my mother kept me in that situation. That's not okay. But I also see my mother was weak. She was an alcoholic. She lived in this fear and in this dark, dark place where she didn't know what else to do. She didn't think that she would be able to survive without him taking care of us.
Yeah.
Right? Even though this was happening to her own daughter.
Yep.
So I give so many educational, introspective work, the tools, action items. So, no matter what we are taught, we must put these things into action or change will not happen. And I just want to encourage you, meet you where you are in whether it's your sobriety journey, or maybe you just want to let go of some trauma and change the way that you're living. And that's really what the purpose is for me and for this book.
Yeah. And I what you're saying rings so true to me. It's like when we kind of move through our trauma, we can see the messages that are sent to us from the universe, however you want to see that.
Exactly.
And we start to pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
And then, once we do that, we end up breaking that, I'm going to call like the cycle of chaos, because we move out of it. We listen, our mind is free to do that. And we're not, I guess, engulfed in like fear and shame.
And that's like the clarity of your purpose, right?
Yeah.
So that's what starts coming through, because ultimately we are all supposed to be living a passionate, joyful life. There's no mistake that any of us are here. It's just finding our purpose and what brings us joy. And it's different for everyone. And it's just, I always want to encourage people, like, listen to your gut, listen to your intuition. Like, it doesn't matter what that has to do, if it's people in your life or the next step that you want to take. And, people are dragging you down and saying you can't do it. Well, why can't you do it? There's a reason that you're thinking about it. It's a reason why that has been brought to you. It's just finding the capacity to move through the fear and make it happen. And just look at life as opportunities and failure as a beautiful lesson, because that's where we learn the most.
Yeah. And being able to embrace that and move through that. Marci, thank you so much for coming on. Before we end, I always like to ask one question.
Yeah.
Maybe someone's out there and they're not sure, like they can do it, or maybe they're like, I can't see the signs or whatever. And you could say one thing to them. What would you want them to know? What would you want to say? What would be your message?
Well, I'd want to say a little bit more than one thing. I just want to say, first of all, that your past does not define you. You are not alone, and that you are worthy. You are worthy of the most beautiful life. And sobriety is hard, but it is where the magic is.
I love it. I love it. Love it. Okay. How can, if people want to get your book, how can they find you? Where can they go?
Well, you can go to Amazon You can go to barnesandnoble.com, target.com, walmart.com, Goodreads. You can also go to my website, wakeupwithmarci.com. And I have some really exciting news. If you do live in Manhattan, my book is in the Barnes & Noble at 5th and 45th, and I have some signed copies there.
Ooh, awesome.
Or if you want to just reach out to me at wakeupwithmarci@gmail.com. Love to hear from you. If there's any questions I can answer, and I could maybe send you a signed copy.
Oh, that would be awesome. I'm going to put all the links in the show notes at theaddictedmind.com so they can find you, they can get it. Marci, thank you for coming on, sharing your wisdom, your story to inspire other people to move through this journey. So just thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you for listening to the Addicted Mind podcast. As usual, all the links will be in the show notes where you can get Marci's book, Chaos to Clarity, at addictedmind.com. So check that out. And if you got a lot out of this episode, think of sharing it with a friend. That would be awesome. And if you want to continue the conversation online, join our Facebook group. Just go to Facebook, type in the Addicted Mind podcast, and click join. All right, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will talk to you on the next episode.